why don't we get started? I'll just give you your name, where you work, and just a brief introduction.
Shirsolkar. I'm Senior Director and CTO for Strategic Partnership at Dell Technologies. We focus on co-innovation and engineering with select partners, Red Hat, IBM being one of them.
Hi everyone, I'm Brad Topol. I'm an IBM Distinguished Engineer and Director of Open Technologies. I lead a large team that contributes to a large number of the AI open source projects that go into Watson X, and also some folks that work in the OpenShift cloud space and Kubernetes.
Hey everyone, Jay Marshall, run business development at Neural Magic, kind of work at the confluence of product engineering, customers, and partners. We basically provide software acceleration for machine learning models on CPUs instead of GPUs, so good to see you all.
Yeah, contrary to popular belief, I'm not Jeremy. I'm Sherrod. So I'm responsible for the engineering of OpenShift AI. And I'm stepping in for Jeremy. I think he has a video that he's doing now, so happy to be here there.
Awesome, thank you very much. So let's get out of the way right now. The elephant in the room, the generative AI. For organizations that are thinking about investigating or what they're holding back here, what are the problems? Why should they look at generative AI more closely? And I think, secondly, what are some really good business value use cases that I could go to somebody in the C-suite and say, this is why you need generative AI, not because it's the hip new thing?
I'll go first. I mean, the obvious reason is the competitive edge generative AI brings to a wider variety of industries, right? So if you're thinking about it, that you're gonna miss the train, right? You want to jump on that. You know, what I say is, you know, ask yourself what I call it the wins work. I think it means words, numbers, sound, images, and then ask yourself how much of your cost base of your industry or your company is based on wins work, not necessarily knowledge work. And you'll find for most industries out there, that's a big number. Right? So you don't want to definitely lose that competitive edge when it comes to generative AI. And then start small. I mean, use the sandbox approach. If you're still thinking about, you know, why you want to invest into it, you know, take a very particular use case that's not mostly costly for you to do. And even for large companies, even a small percentage win over there, the amount of money you'll save in improved productivity is high.
So it's fear of missing out and productivity gains. Right. Okay, that's a good answer. Next.
So, is this one on?
I don't know.
Is this one on?
Yep.
So it'd be very hard for me to give advice on this if I didn't feel like, you know, we had some experience with it, because I feel like that's not fair. And fortunately at IBM we have had some experience. Earlier in this year, after we released Watson X, we did an internal hackathon. We called it the Watson X Challenge. And, you know, we had 167,000 IBM employees participate. I guess that's what happens when the CEO says, hey, y'all should participate, right? And it comes down from the CEO. Because when I say come participate in my challenge, I get like 20 or 30 people, right? But he got 167,000. And I got to be a judge for that. And it really was incredible what the people were able to build when they take sort of the tools, and we have tools like Watson Assistant that helps you build a chatbot with no code, or Watson Orchestrator that helps you automate workflows. But they're able to take those and then combine them with the foundation models and combine them with prompt tuning. And they were really able to show that they could really improve the efficiency of things that in their day jobs they really hated doing. So it was typically things that were process-oriented that they had to deal with, whether it was financial processes that they have to do and they were able to speed those up, or customer service kind of activities, or HR activities. So just seeing from the internal experience of what people were able to build with the new technologies and the foundation models was really incredible.
Yeah, I think what I would add to that as well is, and this maybe falls into the category of dabbling, I think this can be very overwhelming for folks. It's almost that kind of analysis paralysis, especially the risks associated with things that we don't really know the model is going to output over time. And so I think that being able to take some of these even more internal use cases, I think that the consumer-driven applications, everybody's favorite ChatGPT, the second you have any kind of business leader that thinks about their data feeding those kinds of models and then being turned outside when they don't have internal expertise, that can start to kill any momentum. So maybe even starting with internal apps, internal processes, things that you can measure. What do you have data on that you can then try to automate? It's all automation, right? That you can ultimately automate with an LLM, measure against, and start to build that internal trust.
I believe you're the only one that hasn't answered.
Yeah, I think the biggest part of this is to not fall into the trap of looking at generative AI as something that's going to solve all of your problems, right? And because we see the trap of board of directors or executives that say, hey, you need to go do something. And executives need to be very careful with, hey, go do something, because then you get answers to problems you never asked. And so I think it's very important for us to be realistic about the strength of what generative AI can do for us. I think we're still very much in a world where it's an augmentation of the processes. I love, Raj, what you just said. Like, if you look at it as how do you take all the tasks that people didn't, or even Brad, what you mentioned, like take all the tasks that people don't care about or they don't want to do and automate that so they can find time to do more important or more challenging things that generative AI can't solve. I think those are the things we should start to look at. And when we even look at it from like a developer perspective with IBM Watson Code Assistant, the idea there is not to replace the developer, it's to have the developer spend more of their time on challenging areas. And some of the things we're looking at is like even the DevOps side of this. Okay, I've written my code, now how do I get it into production? Boy, that process sucks right now, right? It's a really lengthy process. How do we use AI to be able to do more of that where it can check your PRs or make sure your documentation's right, like all those things that we hate. So I think we have to be very, very clear. As leadership in organizations, you have to be very clear as to what problems you're asking your teams to solve.
That's a good point. And I think accelerators are definitely critical in this space, particularly when you deal with large language models. It's the sheer amount of work that goes into building it. And earlier today, when I asked the crowd, it was primarily an IT operations type centric group. What do you think this is going to mean, right? Because there is no such thing as a small large language model, right? And there's probably not, it's heavy compute, right? Even if you just do something small, it's a fair bit of compute. What are the best ways, like, any words of advice for IT operations people that have to support these workloads in addition to keeping the lights on?
Yeah, I think I can start. This one, I'm actually very interested in following this space, and we've been doing some research. I think it's really we're gonna transition to a world where generative AI was cool, but you need to really maximize your infrastructure and cut down on costs. I think there's multiple layers of that we can look at. I mentioned it before, something as simple as scaling to 0 when your models are not being served, or we have some great technology on the OpenShift AI side that allows you to scale up your infrastructure and your GPUs only when you're ready to run your training job, so it's not eating away at resources. I think the next level of that, what we have to do is look at ways in which we can optimize the kernel, right? How do I optimize kernel for PyTorch, or how do I optimize the kernel for deep learning and everything we're trying to do that's closer to the hardware? And when we start to look at those abilities to optimize, then that'll naturally, well, hopefully, will reduce the expense of a lot of this, because It's one of those things where hopefully as you have optimizations, you can reduce the expense. You don't just start to jam more data and more code and say, oh, now I can run more. So I think that's going to be the key is when people start to fully understand how expensive this can be, there's immediately going to be a backlash, and I think there's that careful balance. And when you have a platform like OpenShift, Frank, the nice thing is it gives you that flexibility. Like, you can have that balance between your applications and your data science initiatives, and even have things where, we've got some great technologies coming out that allow you to say, I want this group of nodes to be dedicated to data science. I want these group of nodes to be dedicated to applications. Like, that flexibility for the IT person is going to be key for them to maximize their opportunities.
I'll just add, spend some time sharpening the pencil a little bit, right? So, basic cost hygiene or spending hygiene is important. Have your cost allocation, monitor your spending. Start with those. Pick your use cases carefully, right? Because there is a variety of things generative AI and AI technologies can solve for, but pick that gives you the most value. And then look at techniques which are obviously evolving, but RAG technique, you can get a lot more accurate, a lot more scalable without costly retraining. You can use such techniques in your operations to basically not go to the deep end here.
So here's what I think is really interesting, and it goes back to the dabbling piece of the question. So much of what happens on the model training side, right? There's this wonderful dividing line, because when I go onto the left of the line where it's the model training, you've got some incredible technology advances, and the people that have to work on that learned how to do the neural networks and the transformer neural networks, and you look at that and you go, oh my gosh, you people are brilliant, and you're way smarter than me, and I wish when I did my PhD I was smart enough to take some neural network classes. So on that side of the line, it's really impressive, and I would say, intimidating. But when you go and cross the line to the accelerator piece, and you see, and we provide some accelerators, my team provides some accelerators, and now you get to the prompt tuning phase. Well, now it's really cool, because let's say, I have a person over in Dubai right now at GuideTech giving this demo of prompt tuning, where he shows, hey, you've got a prompt, and you type it into our little tool that says try out the prompt, and it does okay, and then he adds a little, just creative, right? These are words, not code, right? He's changing the phrase, and by changing the phrase, he gets a little better result. And then, the Watson X approach is we support multiple models. He can then also tweak and say, well, I don't want to try Llama 2. Let me try this model and see if it does a little better. And then the other little parameter you can tweak is what's called the number of tokens. Well, do I want 5 sentences back, or do I want a paragraph back? And so what's really cool is the knobs that you're turning to get your good result are the kind of knobs that require creativity, as opposed to somebody that knows how to calculate gradients and do model tuning. And so that's what I think is really cool. Yes, there was a ton of incredibly cool technology that really, really smart people had to do, but for people to take advantage of this, now it's a lot more fun. It's, well, did you come up with a good prompt and try this model versus that model and try your, tweak the number of tokens? And then we have tools like Watson Assistant where it's no-code chatbots that you can plug it into. So those are the type of tools that we provide that allow you to dabble and feel like you got a good result without having to write a lot of code, and frankly, not having to know all that really heavy-duty, heavy-lifting type model training stuff to get your result done. You actually need people that are more on the creative side, almost artistic in how they phrase the prompts.
So almost like prompt ops.
What's that?
Prompt ops.
Yep.
So the reason why I interrupted, because I think prompt ops is going to be a thing. So, but I know you work at a company that you have an interesting value proposition, because one of the limiting factors right now is GPU availability and cost. But your company, you may be able to kind of alleviate some of that pain.
Yeah, I feel a little bit biased on this one, so I'm going to throw a little asterisk up there just to be clear, because I think what he mentioned a minute ago is really important. If you're early in this, which is pretty much everybody, right? There's a handful of really large players, handful of enterprises that are early adopters, but it's super early. If you walk away with one thing, I would say the separation of training versus inferencing, okay, and how you're approaching each. And how this applies with accelerators and hardware accelerators is everybody thinks that it's kind of not one size fits all as in one GPU or one hardware accelerator, but oh, go get all the T4s and A10s and A100s and V100s, and oh, don't forget the H100s, and we're just going to figure out how to use them for everything, all right? You do your homework on how you're going to look to be doing things like capacity planning. Do most data scientists know what capacity planning is? That's a joke.
No, we all know the answer.
But for IT ops folks, right, your 3 to 5 year budget cycles, okay? Well, which hardware accelerator are you going to get? Well, it depends on what models you're going to use. Are you putting it on public cloud? Well, which region and which availability zone? Because, you know, different ones are available at different scale, and don't get me started on edge, right? So it's easy right now. Someone this morning had made the comment about kind of Hello World and getting Hello World into production. That's where we are with this stuff right now, right, folks? So that's awesome. That's great. Make that happen. Show the innovation. Show some quick wins. But when you have to start thinking about putting it into production, one thing about this space, the models are inextricably tethered to the hardware. Lots of us haven't seen this, maybe even in our careers. My first 15 years as a software engineer is when abstractions started to come up, right? Web servers, application servers, even database servers. You kind of don't have to care about the hardware. DevOps, developers care about code. Ops care about the infrastructure, the core value prop of OpenShift. That changes here. Like, you have to realize that tethering. So yes, selfishly, we let you do that with just on CPUs, but I didn't want to go there. So yeah, there are options, neural magic or otherwise, that let you look at other approaches. Every model doesn't need a GPU. So that's probably the lightest way I could put it.
So I think Brad kind of touched on this, and I'll kind of merge these questions together so we could talk all day, I'm sure. Most of the foundational LLM space is focused at the hyperscaler level. Not all, but a big chunk of it. So why is it important to have a hybrid cloud approach for fine-tuning, prompt tuning, and serving out these models? Like what? Because you meant basically what you described was essentially like you kind of glossed over it. You made it sound easy. It was like, oh, I'm going to use Llama, or I'm going to use this, or I'll use that's not necessarily. It's the tooling to make that easy, I think, is where the opportunity is. So what have you done on What's Next to make that happen?
Right, because what's interesting is, you start with one model for one activity and it's really great, and then you realize you've got another part of the flow of what's happening, and that model is not giving you the results that you really need, and so then you switch to a different model and it's a lot better. So the ability to switch to different models for different parts and then decide which one you want to then fine tune or do some training on, and then you're going to need your platform to be able to do that, right? Because you're still taking that model and adding new data to it to make it more tailored for your particular problem. You're going to need some infrastructure resources. So there's that critical step in the middle, and I work with Sherrod. We're making sure we provide the machine learning workflows and the scalability infrastructure in OpenShift and the OpenShift AI platform, so that you've got those capabilities and that they scale to do those things. But it is great, when you tweak those parameters and you pick the right model, and then you do a little bit of extra tuning, and you see, just like people saw with ChatGPT for the first time, when it starts giving you really good results, and you realize how much time you're going to save because it's answering, say, the customer service questions really, really well, that feels really good.
Interesting. I'd like to hear some from a pure hardware point of view.
From a hybrid AI perspective, if anybody remembers the cloud wave, everybody was like, let's go to the cloud. And they'd be like, well, you cannot go everything to the cloud, so let's go hybrid cloud. And now like, oh, it's more than one public cloud, so now it's multi-cloud. I think the AI is going to follow the same kind of suite. I think it's data that determines. I believe in the last session, Shepard said it, it's much easier to bring workload to the data than moving your data around. Data security and data privacy is going to be a big thing for generative AI. Garbage in, garbage out. It applies even for Gen AI. Data gravity is another thing, right? You want to be close to your platform needs to be close where the application and infrastructure is processing this data. So I believe, for example, inferencing at the edge, I believe there's a study there, 88%, I believe, of AI workloads, inferencing, or the servers that's going to do that at the edge will be doing inferencing, right? Because the data is generating more and more data towards the edge, right? So I think that's where the hybrid cloud or cloud AI market is going to go.
And just to add to that, we lived through this when we developed Ansible Lightspeed with IBM Code Assistant. The data was not in the cloud. It was in a private data center. That data was not going to ever be in the cloud. We're going to have customers where whether it's their preference or their constraint, they cannot move data into the cloud. But that doesn't mean you can't serve the model in the cloud. So for example, Ansible Lightspeed is in the cloud as a service. And so we're seeing that play out today, right? What does it mean to train your model in your private data centers with your own data, but then deploy it to something that allows you to burst to either one cloud or many clouds, or even a combination? And so I think when you start to add to that, like you said, Raj, like on the edge side of things, inferencing at the edge, that gets even more complicated because now you have many different layers of this. You may have a near edge, and then you may have a far edge beyond that. And so I think it's going to be really, really interesting seeing that play out. And the nice thing is there are stacks that help with this, and that's what I love about OpenShift, right? OpenShift gives you that hybrid cloud. It's almost like we predicted this would happen, Frank. But it's like, we have that leveling playing field where OpenShift gives you that ability to have that hybrid cloud story, and now we're really seeing it play out, and it's not that we think the market's going there. We actually had to do that ourselves, which is pretty interesting to see play out.
Yeah, I think the role of operational flexibility is very important, particularly here, because I was at a customer meeting a few weeks ago, and there's data that will never leave their data center, ever, 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 for reasons real and imagined, and that's just not going to happen. But they were excited about the opportunity to learn from their experience and be able to kind of sell that experience to their customers in a way that is new and unique.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to add, touch on what he was saying about data. The data piece is so critical. So, what we're seeing is, a lot of people are using data lakes. Anybody familiar with data lakes? And anybody know the big joke that, so you're putting in the data in the data lakes because it's so cost effective, but when it's time to get the data out, those data lakes become data swamps. And so while there's all this work going on in the infrastructure side, there's work going on in the open source communities on the data side with things like Presto that are, they'll give you an SQL query engine, not just for SQL databases, but for unstructured databases, for data lakes like S3, all your data sources. So, a whole bunch of work being done so that we can query the data where it resides, because y'all said, hey, we're not moving the data. And you've got to be able to query the data where it resides and do federated data queries as well to then combine that with the solutions that we're talking about on the infrastructure side.
Absolutely. And right now, the regulations tend to be on the data, not necessarily the models created from the data. And I think that's an important distinction, which I think this is important. I want to bring up is what is the plan, just in general, for governance around these large language models, right? So, Code Assistant is definitely a great example of narrow use case large language models as opposed to kind of one large language model to rule them all that other companies are going with. What do you think the governance is going to look like on this? How do you do the monitoring? What does that look like? It just seems like it's an open field now.
I say it's ethical AI, right? I think for ethical AI, your AI needs to be beneficial. It needs to serve a purpose in the society. It needs to be equitable. That there should not be any bias. You got to remove all the prejudice, the data classification, cleansing, that whole process. Responsible AI, which starts with data governance, the model governance. I know watsonx has watsonx.gov. That does a lot portion of this. You have to have AI traceability and things of that nature, but also the application governance needs to be there, and at the end, it needs to be accountable, right? Especially the model, the people that are creating and producing the foundation models. I'll go back to IBM. I mean, they do have some their own curated models that they serve and make available. watsonx AI as Dell, we are looking at that very closely, and I think the big portion of that is because they would stand behind what the model responses would be. You're not going to get that everywhere, right? So I think this is hard. I think out of everything, AI governance is hard, and we have to be very careful.
Yeah, so it's a big problem, and yes, we have curated models and we have some governance, but the nice thing about so much of this being an open source is that already gives you that foundation of a notion of community. And the best open source communities, as we've seen over the years, have a foundation behind them. Think Kubernetes with Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And so what I've been seeing is with so many of these open source projects, PyTorch is in the PyTorch Foundation, K-Serve Model Mesh is in the LFAI and Data Foundation. At the foundation level, we're starting to see a huge push in making sure that we do have certification and how are we going to be able to evaluate these models and see, are we going to come up with standards for provenance so you can actually figure out that, well, what was it trained on and can I trust it? So a huge work that needs to be done, but you're already in a good position when you've already got an open source community all agreeing, and I talk to my counterparts at other companies, and we're all seeing the same problem, just like he said. We need to make sure these models are good, and you can trust them, and there's fairness, and there's intersectional fairness. And I think the way you'll see that happen is by, just like we all work together in an open source community to make, Kubernetes, which is the foundation of OpenShift, better, we all work together to, not only on PyTorch and K-Serve Model Mesh, but also on those certifications and standards so that we can feel like we can trust the models.
Yeah, and I think it's something that we've seen. I have not seen anything like this in my career where, November 2022, a lot of people kind of referenced that, like, what was it, June 2007 with the iPhone, like when ChatGPT, and as that's evolved, like everything exploded. And then the last 4 or 5 months, the explosion of open source models, which ties to the talk a couple segments ago. And I think at first it was just kind of the models, but now you're getting models, weights, and data sources. So now when you bring that inside, and if you want to fine-tune those models, and again, what approach are you taking to fine-tuning those models? All that goes into what the model's going to expose. And then there's lots of startups, so we're also early, right? You're seeing new platforms coming out where you can plug it in, and every request that comes in and every response that comes out. So you have auditability, and then you're putting LLMs on that to tell you where you might have drift or where there might be sensitivities. So I think this whole space is moving so fast. But as per earlier, I think open source is going to be what helps contribute to that, because otherwise they're just a bunch of secret boxes.
So tell me about why the indemnification of models that IBM has announced that they're going to do. Why is that a big deal?
Because beyond causing your favorite IBM attorneys the most heartburn ever in their lives.
Lawyers get paid very well to pay for Rolaids and stuff.
So beyond that, right, obviously it is important, right? We've seen this over the years to get people to adopt things, they've got to feel like they're safe. I mean, many of us are early enough to remember when there was this thing called Linux, and people were scared to jump on it because people were trying to tell them, oh, you're going to get sued for using it. And way back when, companies like IBM said, we're going to help make sure with our patents that no, it's safe to use. So it's so critical to be able to stand behind models like we're doing for a similar fashion that I think it's going to speed up adoption. That's why we do it, right? So particularly enterprise customers need to feel safe that they can use these things and bad things aren't going to happen. And like way back when, we had to do things to be able to make the customers feel like they were safe to use it. We've got to do similar things these days, and that does mean a lot of work of curating models, and if they're one of ours, we're going to indemnify it, and there's also ones that we vet that aren't ours that, again, we're going to really look hard at if we're going to ship them with our product. Because it really is our job to make sure you've got safe things to use for the enterprise.
So that makes me wonder, how do enterprises get started quickly with this space, right? I mean, what does Dell have to accelerate that, just from the hardware point of view?
Yeah, so, it's day 2. Literally yesterday, Dell, in partnership with Red Hat, announced their Apex Cloud platform for Red Hat OpenShift platform. What that means is, you can get your entire OpenShift stack within hours. It's an easy button. It's a lot of effort went into there. I mean, I've been working with Red Hat for the last 18, 20 months to get that going. It's a co-innovated, co-engineered product. But if you think about it, it's a very quick, easy way with a complete validated cycles and lifecycle management where you can get a Dell software-defined infrastructure and OpenShift on top of it up and running within hours, right? Now, if you couple that with, the fact that most of the AI or MLOps application would be running on top of containers, take OpenShift AI, for example, it becomes a perfect use case for such a platform. So we are now more looking into, how do we more standardize this in terms of validated design and more. So it's a very interesting space that Dell is approaching, and a lot more of that is going to come in this space.
So you've been involved with this from basically day one, Red Hat OpenShift AI, when it had another name, several other names. Where do you see the most opportunity for growth? We have software, hardware represented here, as well as optimization of more than just one type of compute power. Where do you think this is going to go next? I mean, obviously, there's going to be a hype cycle when it comes to generative AI, but really, where is the rubber going to meet the road and keep the traction?
Yeah, that's a great question, Frank. I think there's going to be an opportunity really soon here where we start to see people. Actually, I'm going to take a step back. About maybe 10, I don't know, maybe not even 10 years ago, does anyone remember when everyone all of a sudden, every executive said, I needed to hire data scientists, right? I need as many data scientists as possible. And everyone went crazy. It was like data scientists were growing on candy. Like, it didn't even matter if they barely had a degree. Everyone was paying top dollar for data scientists. Well, now they're questioning, what did I get for that investment? I spent a lot of money on data scientists, on my data science initiatives. We see this all the way from CIOs through to people who have, data science in their C-level names now. And so the question is, okay, what did I get for that? I think we're starting to see that evolution where the research work that came out of the data science initiatives that started 5, 10 years ago, we're now seeing the hardware and the infrastructure and the tooling start to connect those dots, saying, okay, we can help you get that research work into production and provide value for your companies. So what I'm most excited about is looking at the whole stack, from the hardware all the way up through the application layer, and looking at the trusted advisors, looking at the Dells, the Neuromagics, the IBMs, the Red Hats, who have been in this space, and they understand what it takes to get those experiments into production, and trusting that that's the right stack for you. I'm excited about that world where all of that investment in the data sciences. The only reason I say this is because I couldn't get budget for my application developers, but boy, oh boy, there were like tenfold data scientists coming into the team. So I have a pet peeve about this. So I apologize. But for me, it's seeing that historic investment in research work, knowing that they have to do something, now coming into fruition with the right infrastructure, the right stacks, the right hardware, software to operationalize all that research work that's been done in the past. And I think that's agnostic to generative AI. It's just data science in general. Generative AI is one layer on top of it, but there's a lot of things that happen in the HPC and all, things that happened way before generative AI was a hot thing with ChatGPT, that those investments coming into production and operationalization, I'm excited about that as well.
That's a great answer. I know we're getting close to time, so just final thoughts. Try to keep it to a minute or less. You go first.
Sorry, the final thoughts?
Yeah, if you have any.
This is an exciting space. I think generative AI, it's going to truly be a transformational technology. I compare that to the first use of internet, like how it transformed. I think it's going to be bigger than cloud, and that's a lot of, and it's still very, very, very early. So I think 5-7 years from now, I think we will probably look back at this moment and see how far we come. But I think it's going to change how we do business in many industries.
So I think the key points to take away is, one, it's so awesome that so much of this work is being done out in open source, because when we do things out in open source, as we've seen with Kubernetes, and now we're seeing with all the AI projects and the infrastructure, you get the world's experts working together to deliver the solutions. And no single company can compete with a good open source ecosystem. So look, just like we did with Kubernetes, and OpenShift builds on top of that to build a great ecosystem there. You're going to see great ecosystems on all the parts of the AI infrastructure that Sherrod likes to talk about. And you're going to see a lot of focus on solutions you can trust, but more importantly, these are things that help people do their jobs, right? These are things that help you to do your job more quickly. These are not things that, we don't believe at IBM you're taking the human out of the loop. What you're doing is you're giving the humans, tools that are going to allow them to do their jobs a lot easier, a lot faster. Great examples like, there's folks taking Watson X and using it for contract summarization. So you have these horribly, unless you have a law degree, you can't read the darn contract, right? Huge contracts. And you can use these tools, and they don't not only summarize, but you can ask questions, and you can actually get the answers you need, right, to understand things. So I agree. It's a very exciting time, and a lot of innovations that have happened the past couple of years that have really set us up for this moment that, we can actually deliver really cool solutions.
And I'm comfortable saying this is actually don't work for Red Hat, so I don't think that this is a shill. But for those that are just getting started, okay, remember if you're someone that tried to stitch together Kubernetes by yourself, or 20 years ago you're building a web server, app server by yourself. The thing about OpenShift AI and what we're excited about partnering with them on, from our perspective, yeah, you can pip install our software on a physical server or on a VM. We're available as a container. You can go to the marketplace, press the button, get it running. But with what we're integrating with OpenShift AI, what it means is all the other stuff comes along for the ride, and we don't have to worry about it, right? And all the things that you bake into everything from the raw data, the data science, the Jupyter notebooks, on through monitoring and management, it's kind of a little bit of an easy button to just get started. So if you have data science teams, chances are they're using those notebooks, all right? IT ops, you're in this room. Hey, pretty nice for managing your infrastructure, right? That's the key right now. These teams, these disparate personas from IT ops, developer, data science, they don't talk to you. You thought DevOps was bad. Wait till you get to like Dev AI ops. I may have just made that up. But the point is, it's coming. So it's a great way to maybe have an easy button. That was more than a minute, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. That was good.